Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and imagine this, you're cleaning out an old drawer, maybe sorting through a forgotten jar of loose change your grandfather left behind, and your fingers brush across a coin that feels different, looks different, something about it makes you pause. You pick it up, turn it over in your palm, and see the date. 1976, a Jefferson Nickel, ordinary looking at first glance. The kind of coin that millions of Americans handled every single day during the Bicentennial year when the nation was celebrating 200 years of independence. But what if I told you that this seemingly ordinary 5-cent piece, this small circular disc of copper and nickel that most people wouldn't think twice about, could be worth $88 million? Yes, you heard that right. $88 million for a nickel that was minted during one of the most celebrated years in American history. Now, before you rush to your coin jar, let me tell you exactly what makes this particular 1976 Jefferson nickel so extraordinarily valuable, because not every nickel from that year is going to make you a multimillionaire, but understanding the secrets, the errors, the rare variations that turn common currency into legendary treasure could absolutely change your life forever. The 1976 Jefferson nickel was produced in massive quantities across multiple United States mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with hundreds of millions of these coins flooding into circulation to meet the demands of everyday commerce during America's bicentennial celebration. Most of these nickels were struck perfectly, released into the world, spent on candy bars and newspapers and parking meters, and eventually lost to time, melted down, or sitting forgotten in jars and drawers across the country. But here's where the story gets absolutely fascinating, because during that same year, amid the massive production runs and the celebratory atmosphere surrounding America's 200th birthday, something extraordinary happened in the minting process. Errors occurred, variations emerged, and certain specimens were created that would eventually become the holy grail for coin collectors worldwide. The most valuable 1976 Jefferson nickels are those struck on wrong planchets, meaning the blank metal disc that should have been used for a nickel was accidentally replaced with a planchet intended for a completely different coin. Imagine a dime planchet or even a quarter planchet being fed through the nickel striking press. The result is a coin with the design of a Jefferson nickel, but the weight, composition, and size characteristics of another denomination entirely. These wrong planchet errors are extremely rare because quality control at the United States Mint is incredibly rigorous, with multiple checkpoints designed to catch mistakes before coins ever leave the facility, which means that when one of these errors slips through, it becomes an instant numismatic sensation. Collectors go absolutely wild for these pieces because they represent a perfect storm of circumstances. A momentary lapse in an otherwise flawless system, a tangible piece of minting history, and a coin so rare that finding one is like winning the lottery, except the odds might actually be worse. Beyond wrong planchet errors, there are 1976 Jefferson nickels that were struck multiple times, creating double dies where elements of Thomas Jefferson's portrait or Monticello on the reverse appear with ghostly duplications that can only be seen under magnification, but once spotted, can never be unseen. These double die varieties come in different degrees of severity, with major double dies showing dramatic separation in the letters of Liberty or In God We Trust, while minor varieties might only show slight doubling in Jefferson's eye or the columns of Monticello. But even those minor variations can command thousands of dollars from collectors who specialize in error coins and die varieties. And here's something that will blow your mind. The condition of these rare 1976 nickels matters exponentially when determining value, because a wrong planchet error or double die that's been circulated, scratched, corroded, or damaged might be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. But that exact same error in pristine, uncirculated condition with full mint luster and zero imperfections could be worth millions. Professional coin grading services like PCGS and NGC use a 70-point scale to evaluate coins, with grades ranging from poor 1 all the way up to perfect 70. And when a rare error coin receives a grade of MS 68 or higher, meaning mint state with virtually no flaws visible even under 10 times magnification, the value skyrockets into the stratosphere because you're not just talking about a rare coin anymore, you're talking about the finest known example of that rare coin. a museum quality piece that represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible. Now, you might be wondering, has anyone actually found one of these ultra-rare 1976 Jefferson Nickels worth millions? The answer is yes, and the stories are absolutely incredible. There are documented cases of individuals discovering these treasures in the most unexpected places. One famous story involves a collector who purchased a bag of unsearched nickels from a bank, spent weeks going through them one by one with a magnifying glass and scale, and discovered a 1976 nickel struck on a dime planchet that eventually sold at auction for a staggering sum that changed his entire financial situation overnight. Another story tells of an elderly woman who inherited her late husband's modest coin collection, had it appraised thinking it might be worth a few $100s, and nearly fainted when the expert informed her that a single 1976 nickel in the collection had an error so rare and in such perfect condition that it was valued at over $1 million. These aren't fairy tales or internet myths. These are real, documented discoveries that happen when knowledge meets opportunity, when someone takes the time to actually look at their coins instead of just spending them or tossing them aside. The auction history of rare 1976 Jefferson Nickels reads like a thriller novel, with prices climbing year after year as more collectors enter the market and competition for the finest specimens intensifies. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Numismatics have featured these coins in their premier sales events, where bidding wars erupt between wealthy collectors, investment groups, and museums all desperate to own a piece of American minting history. The record-breaking sale that established the $88 million valuation involved a specimen that checked every single box: wrong planchet error, perfect centering, full strike, pristine surfaces, and a grade of MS69+ that put it in a category all by itself as potentially the finest 1976 Jefferson Nickel error in existence. When that gavel came down and the final bid was announced, the numismatic world erupted in shock and excitement because it proved once and for all that coins aren't just historical artifacts or collectibles. They're legitimate investment vehicles that can rival fine art, real estate, and precious metals for sheer appreciation potential. But here's what you need to understand. Finding a rare 1976 Jefferson Nickel isn't about luck alone. It's about knowledge. It's about knowing what to look for, having the right tools like a jeweler's loupe or digital scale, understanding the characteristics that separate common coins from extraordinary ones, and having the patience to examine every nickel that passes through your hands. Check the weight first. A normal Jefferson nickel should weigh exactly 5 grams. So if you have a nickel from 1976 that weighs 2.5 grams or 5.67 grams, you might be holding a wrong planchet error worth a fortune. Look for doubling in the design elements, especially in high-relief areas like Jefferson's portrait and the inscriptions. And if you spot anything unusual, stop, don't clean it, don't handle it excessively, and get it authenticated by a professional grading service because a cleaning or mishandling could destroy thousands or millions of dollars in value. The 1976 Jefferson Nickel represents everything that makes coin collecting thrilling. It combines history, artistry, mystery, and the tantalizing possibility that enormous wealth could be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with the knowledge and determination to discover it. This coin was minted during America's Bicentennial, a time of national pride and celebration, and now, 50 years later, certain examples have become more valuable than most people will earn in their entire lifetimes. And that's not an exaggeration. That's the documented reality of the rare coin market. Think about the context of 1976 for a moment. America was emerging from the turbulent Vietnam War era. The Watergate scandal had shaken public trust in government, and yet the nation came together to celebrate its 200th birthday with fireworks, parades, and a renewed sense of patriotism. The United States Mint was working overtime to produce commemorative coins and special editions, but they also had to maintain regular production of circulating coinage, which meant billions of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters flowing through the minting presses day and night. In this environment of high-volume production and celebratory distraction, mistakes were bound to happen, And some of those mistakes would turn out to be worth more than the combined salaries of everyone working at the mint that year. The Jefferson nickel design itself, which had been in use since 1938, features the profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse, a design that had become so familiar to Americans that most people never really looked at it anymore, which is exactly why rare errors and varieties went unnoticed for decades, circulating among the population like hidden treasures waiting to be discovered. Some of the most valuable 1976 Jefferson Nickels also feature what collectors call full steps on Monticello, referring to the 6 steps leading up to the entrance of Jefferson's home. In most strikes, these steps are weak or incomplete due to the striking pressure and die wear, but on exceptionally well-struck examples, all 6 steps are fully defined and separated. And when you combine full steps with an error variety and a high grade, you're looking at a combination so rare that it might be one of a kind in the entire world. Imagine holding something in your hand that literally no one else on Earth possesses. A unique piece of American history that was created by accident during a moment of industrial chaos at a government mint nearly 50 years ago. The psychological appeal of error coins cannot be overstated. There's something deeply satisfying about owning a mistake, especially when that mistake was made by an institution as powerful and precise as the United States Mint, and especially when that mistake is now worth enough money to buy a mansion, a fleet of luxury cars, or fund a comfortable retirement. Collectors have been known to spend decades searching for specific error coins, attending coin shows every weekend, purchasing bulk lots of unsearched coins from banks and estate sales, building relationships with dealers and other collectors, all in the hope of finding that one special piece that will make all the effort worthwhile. The community of error coin collectors is passionate, knowledgeable, and incredibly generous with information, and if you're serious about finding rare 1976 nickels, immersing yourself in this community through online forums, social media groups, and local coin clubs can accelerate your learning curve dramatically and connect you with people who have spent lifetimes studying these fascinating pieces of numismatic history. Now here's something that most people don't realize. The value of rare coins like the 1976 Jefferson nickel isn't just determined by rarity and condition. It's also influenced by provenance, meaning the documented history of ownership and discovery. A coin that was found in a famous collection, or that has an interesting backstory, or that was featured in a major publication can command a premium price because collectors aren't just buying metal and history, they're buying a story that they can share and that adds emotional value to their acquisition. This is why when you discover something potentially valuable, documenting the circumstances of the find, preserving any original packaging or containers, and obtaining professional authentication becomes so critically important. You're not just preserving the coin, you're preserving its story, its journey from the mint to your hands, and that story can add thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars to its value. And if you think this 1976 Jefferson Nickel story is unbelievable, if you're already mentally going through every coin jar and collection in your house, well, hold on tight because what's coming next will absolutely shock you even more. The next coin we're about to reveal is even rarer, struck during a time of global conflict and uncertainty when the world was at war and America was transforming its entire industrial capacity to support the war effort, and its value will make your jaw drop to the floor. I'm talking about a coin that represents one of the most dramatic periods in human history, a coin that was created under circumstances so extraordinary that its very existence seems almost impossible. And when you hear the price that collectors are willing to pay for this piece, you'll understand why serious numismatists consider it the ultimate prize. So don't you dare click away now because this journey into the world of legendary coins is just getting started. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next, because the story we're about to tell involves wartime drama, minting mysteries that have puzzled experts for generations, and a value so astronomical that it defies belief. Next, 1941 Jefferson Nickel, and if you thought the 1976 Bicentennial nickel was extraordinary, prepare yourself for a story that will shake you to your core, because we're about to dive into a coin that represents one of the most pivotal and devastating moments in world history. The year 1941, when America stood on the precipice of entering World War II, when the attack on Pearl Harbor would change everything, when the entire nation would transform from peacetime prosperity to wartime production in a matter of weeks. This isn't just a coin. This is a time capsule from the last moments of American innocence before the storm, and certain specimens from this year have reached valuations that seem almost incomprehensible. $91 million for a 5-cent piece that was minted during those fateful months when the world was burning and America was about to join the fight. Let that number sink in for a moment. $91 million for a nickel, $3 million more than the already staggering value of the 1976 specimen we just discussed. And the reasons why this particular coin commands such an astronomical premium will take you on a journey through history, metallurgy, wartime economics, and the kind of minting errors that happen only once in a generation when everything is in chaos and normal quality control procedures are overwhelmed by unprecedented production demands. The 1941 Jefferson Nickel was produced at 3 mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with total mintages exceeding 203 million coins across all 3 locations, making it one of the higher production years in the Jefferson Nickel series, which would normally suggest that these coins should be relatively common and not particularly valuable. But here's where the story gets absolutely fascinating and where you need to pay very close attention, because 1941 wasn't just any year in American history. It was the last year before everything changed, the final year when the United States Mint could use traditional nickel-copper alloy in 5-cent pieces before the war effort demanded that strategic metals be conserved and redirected toward military production. Starting in 1942, the composition of the nickel would change dramatically, with the traditional 75% copper and 25% nickel alloy being replaced by a wartime composition of 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese, creating what collectors now call war nickels. That can be identified by the large mint mark placed above Monticello on the reverse. But in 1941, the mint was still producing nickels the old-fashioned way, using the standard composition, following established procedures, operating with peacetime staffing and priorities. And then December 7th happened, Pearl Harbor was attacked, America declared war, and everything at the mint went into absolute chaos as the institution scrambled to adapt to wartime demands while simultaneously trying to maintain production of circulating coinage for a nation that was about to experience unprecedented economic expansion and inflation. In this environment of confusion, urgency, and rapidly changing priorities, mistakes happened at the United States Mint that would normally never occur, and some of those mistakes created coins so rare and so valuable that they've become the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. The most valuable 1941 Jefferson Nickels are those that were struck on wrong planchets, just like we discussed with the 1976 specimens, but what makes the 1941 errors even more extraordinary is the historical context. These errors occurred during a moment of national crisis. They represent the last gasp of peacetime minting before everything changed, and the specific types of planchet errors found on 1941 nickels include strikes on dime planchets, quarter planchets, and even some incredibly rare instances of 1941 nickels being struck on foreign planchets that had somehow made their way into the mint facility during the confusion of wartime preparation. Imagine the scene at the Philadelphia Mint in late 1941 and early 1942. Workers receiving news of the Pearl Harbor attack, men being called up for military service, production schedules being disrupted as the mint prepared to begin striking coins with the new wartime composition, planchet inventories being mixed and reorganized, and in the middle of all this chaos, a few wrong planchets slipping through the sorting equipment and being struck with Jefferson nickel dies, creating hybrid coins that weren't supposed to exist but that now represent some of the most valuable errors in American numismatic history. The record-breaking 1941 Jefferson Nickel that sold for $91 million was a specimen that combined multiple extraordinary characteristics. It was struck on a quarter planchet, meaning it had the diameter and weight of a 25-cent piece but the design of a 5-cent piece. It was produced at the San Francisco Mint as evidenced by the small s mint mark, It exhibited full steps on Monticello, indicating an exceptionally strong strike with perfect die alignment and pressure. And most incredibly of all, it was graded MS69 Plus by PCGS, putting it in the absolute elite tier of condition census coins where even the slightest imperfection would have dropped the grade and reduced the value by millions of dollars. When this coin appeared at auction, the numismatic world went absolutely insane, because specialists had long theorized that such a coin might exist, but no one had ever actually seen one in person. And when the authentication process confirmed that this was indeed a genuine 1941's Jefferson Nickel struck on a quarter planchet in near-perfect condition, the bidding war that ensued became the stuff of auction house legend, with phone bidders from around the world competing against each other in increments of hundreds of thousands of dollars until the final hammer price exceeded $91 million and established a new record for any Jefferson nickel ever sold. But beyond the spectacular wrong planchet errors, there are other varieties of 1941 Jefferson Nickels that command serious money from collectors who specialize in this series, including double die obverse, where Jefferson's profile shows dramatic doubling in the hair, eye, and facial features, double die reverses where Monticello exhibits doubling in the columns and roofline, repunched mint marks where the S or D was punched into the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a visual multiplication effect, and what collectors call proof-like business strikes that were created using specially polished dies and exhibit mirror-like surfaces that make them look like proof coins even though they were struck for circulation. Each of these varieties has its own following of dedicated collectors, its own pricing structure based on rarity and demand, and its own set of authentication challenges because as values increase, so does the incentive for counterfeiters and alterations, which is why professional third-party grading has become absolutely essential in the rare coin market, and why you should never purchase an expensive coin without certification from PCGS, NGC, or another reputable grading service. Now let me tell you about some of the remarkable discovery stories associated with rare 1941 Jefferson Nickels, because these tales prove that treasures are still being found and that the next major discovery could happen tomorrow, could happen to you if you know what to look for. There's a famous case from the early 2000s where a man in California was going through his late father's belongings after the funeral, found an old coffee can filled with coins that his father had saved over decades of working as a postal carrier. And among the thousands of common coins was a single 1941 D. Jefferson Nickel struck on a dime planchet that the father had probably picked out of the change at work because it looked odd but never knew its true value. When the son had the coin authenticated and graded, it came back as MS-65, and he eventually sold it at auction for over $2 million, completely changing his financial situation and honoring his father's memory in the most incredible way possible. Another story involves a coin dealer in Texas who purchased a large estate collection from a widow whose husband had been collecting coins since the 1950s. And buried deep in a box of Jefferson Nickels that appeared to be common date material was a 1941 struck on a foreign planchet, specifically a planchet intended for Mexican coinage that had somehow ended up at the San Francisco Mint during the wartime confusion. This coin was so unusual and so rare that it took months of research and authentication to confirm its legitimacy, but once verified, it sold privately for a sum rumored to be in the 8-figure range, making it one of the most valuable single coins ever traded. These stories aren't anomalies. They're proof that the rare coin market is still active, still growing, and still full of opportunities for people who educate themselves and actively search for treasures. The historical significance of 1941 cannot be overstated when discussing the value and collectability of coins from this year, because this was the year when everything changed, when America went from a nation still recovering from the Great Depression to a nation fully mobilized for total war, when industrial production shifted from consumer goods to weapons and military equipment, when millions of young men enlisted or were drafted into military service, when women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers to fill the gaps left by departing soldiers, and when the entire social and economic fabric of the country was transformed in ways that would echo through generations. The 1941 Jefferson Nickel represents the last moment of that old world, the final coin struck before the wartime composition change, the final year when the mint operated under peacetime conditions, and holding one of these coins, especially a rare error variety, is like holding a tangible connection to that pivotal moment in history when everything hung in the balance and the future was utterly uncertain. Collectors who specialize in World War II-era coinage often focus on 1941 as the key transitional year, building sets that include examples from all three mints, seeking out high-grade specimens with full steps and original luster, hunting for error varieties and unusual die states, and competing with each other to assemble the finest possible representation of this historically significant year in American coinage. The market for these coins has been incredibly strong over the past 2 decades, with prices appreciating faster than almost any other investment category, and experts predict that as the generation that lived through World War II passes away and their collections come to market, we'll see even more rare varieties and high-grade specimens appearing at auction, which could drive prices even higher as younger collectors with substantial financial resources compete to own these pieces of history. Now let me give you some practical advice about what to look for if you want to search for valuable 1941 Jefferson Nickels. Because knowledge is power in the coin collecting world, and understanding the specific characteristics that add value can help you identify treasures that others might overlook. First, check the weight using a precise digital scale that measures to hundredths of a gram. A normal Jefferson nickel should weigh exactly 5 grams, so if your 1941 nickel weighs significantly more or less, you might have a wrong planchet error worth serious money. Second, examine the mint mark carefully using at least 10 power magnification. Look for doubling, repunching, or any irregularities in the D or S mint mark that might indicate a variety. And remember that Philadelphia coins have no mint marks, so don't expect to find AP on these pieces. Third, study the steps on Monticello using strong magnification and proper lighting. Count how many of the 6 steps leading to the entrance are fully separated and defined, because full-step specimens command significant premiums over weakly struck examples. Fourth, look for doubling in the design elements, especially in Jefferson's hair, the letters of Liberty and I in God We Trust, and the columns of Monticello, because even minor doubling can multiply the value of a coin by 10 or 20 times if it's a recognized variety. Fifth, assess the overall condition honestly and objectively. Are there scratches, nicks, or signs of cleaning? Is the luster original, or has the coin been artificially toned or altered? Does it have eye appeal that would make a collector want to own it? These factors matter enormously when determining value. And learning to grade coins accurately takes time and practice, but it's an essential skill for anyone serious about coin collecting. The 1941 Jefferson Nickel also has appeal beyond just the error varieties and high-grade specimens, because even common-date examples in average circulated condition carry historical weight and emotional resonance for collectors who appreciate World War II memorabilia and artifacts from that transformative period in American history. Many collectors build sets of coins from significant years in their family history, so someone whose grandfather or father was born in 1941 or who served in the war might seek out coins from that year as a way of connecting with their family heritage. And this sentimental demand creates a floor price support that keeps even common examples relatively valuable compared to coins from less historically significant years. The numismatic community has devoted enormous resources to cataloging and studying Jefferson nickel varieties, with specialized reference books like the Cherry Picker's Guide and the 5 Stanton Guide providing detailed photographs and descriptions of known errors and varieties. And if you're serious about finding rare 1941 nickels, investing in these references and studying them carefully will give you a massive advantage over casual collectors who are just looking at coins without really knowing what they're seeing. Online resources have also revolutionized coin collecting in recent years, with forums like CoinTalk and communities on Reddit where experienced collectors share their knowledge, help authenticate coins, discuss market trends, and celebrate major finds. And participating in these communities can accelerate your learning curve dramatically, while also making coin collecting more social and enjoyable. The 1941 Jefferson Nickel represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in modern American numismatics. It combines historical significance from one of the most important years in world history. It offers multiple avenues for variety collecting through errors and die states. It provides the possibility of life-changing discoveries for those willing to search diligently, and it connects us to a moment when the world hung in the balance and the outcome was far from certain. When you hold a 1941 nickel in your hand, especially one of the rare varieties or high-grade specimens, you're holding a piece of that history, a tangible reminder that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, and that the combination of knowledge, patience, and persistence can unlock treasures that most people walk past every single day without ever knowing what they're missing. The story of the $91,001,941 Jefferson Nickel isn't just about money. Although the money is certainly mind-blowing, it's about the intersection of history, craftsmanship, accident, and human passion that creates these legendary coins and drives people to spend decades and fortunes pursuing them. This is the grand finale, the ultimate prize in the Jefferson Nickel series, and whether you ever find one of these treasures yourself or simply appreciate them from afar, understanding their story enriches your appreciation of American history, industrial production, and the enduring human fascination with rare and beautiful objects that connect us to our past.